I want to talk about stewardship tonight. Ministry is stewardship. All of life is stewardship. Everything we have, both materially and spiritually, we do not own. I mean, it might be in your name, but you don't own it. God is the possessor of heaven and earth, and all things were given to Christ. When he ascended on high, he said he led captivity captive, and he gave gifts unto people. And what that's describing is the spoils of victory, and that the gifts we have are the spoils of the victory that Christ won, that he has shared with us. And so whatever we have by the grace of God was purchased through the death and resurrection of Christ. So whether it's via creation or redemption, God owns it all. And so all of life is stewardship. But I just wanted to talk about the stewardship in ministry. There are two major parables of stewardship. One's in Matthew 25 and the other's in Luke 19. The one in Matthew 25 is verses 14 through 29. And the one in Luke is verses 11 through 27. And because of their wording in English, it's really easy to misunderstand them. Okay? The one in Matthew 25 is called the parable of the talents. Are you familiar with that? The talents. Now, we're having a talent show. Therefore, in our imaginations, when we read about and we see the caption, the parable of the talents, and that the talents are given, talents are given, we think that the talent that is given is ability, and that the stewardship that's given are talents that give you ability. That's not the point of the parable. It's always good to read the Bible. And all right, and if you read it, what it tells you is this: God gives talents, that is the part of the stewardship, according to abilities. The talents are not the abilities. The talent is a designation of money, is what it is. And it's just, Jesus often used money as an example because it's tangible. You know, people can get their heads around it. And so the talent is a money, or in other words, it is something that God gives to us, but he gives to us according to our abilities. So separate the idea of getting the talent from the ability as far as the ability coming from the talent, and look at the fact that there is the abilities, and then God gives talents according to abilities. You follow that? That's the premise of that parable. And the reason that's the premise of the parable is because the stewards are given the same reward, even though they're giving different talents. One receives 5, one 2, and a third one receives 1. Well, he hides this, so let's forget that guy. Okay? If you hide it, you're forgotten. That's just the rule, all righty? The guy who got 5 talents, he multiplies it to 10. And he gets the reward, enter into the joy of the Lord. The one who has given 2 talents multiplies it to 4. And he gets a reward, enter into the joy of the Lord. They both get the same reward, even though one guy had 6 more talents than the other at the end. You follow that? Because it was according to ability. The guy who got 2 talents had the ability to handle 2 talents. You follow that? And therefore, his stewardship was measured according to his ability that the talents were given to him. Now, the point as well is this. If God has not given you more, it's because you can't handle more. Sometimes we think we're a 5 talent when we're a 2 talent. Just thank God we have any talents at all given to us, all right? And God will give you your talents according to your abilities. And so in that parable, you have just that wonderful example of whatever God gives, it's according to the ability. He's not going to give you something you can't handle, okay? Which is really the problem of the 1 talent guy. He hides his talent because he just can't handle it. He thinks God's a bad judge and is coming after him, okay? He's not going to give you more than what you can handle. And so he's not going to withhold from you what you could handle as well. So we have to look at ourselves and say, all right, whatever talents God has given to me, it's according to the abilities that I have. And so I want to grow in that stewardship. Now, the other parable, the one in Luke 19, is the flip of this parable in Matthew 25. The one in Luke 19, there are 10 it implies there are 10 servants. Only 3 of them are mentioned in the outcome. So the people get all balled up over there trying to figure out what that means. But let's just say there's talents given out. Everybody gets 1 talent. Actually, it's not a talent, it's a mina, which is, in the old King James, a pound. And you know what, a pound is a measure of weight. It's also a monetary thing. But in this case, the pound or the mina would be equivalent to about 3 months of salary, okay? So this is a big gift given. So there's this wealthy person going to a far country. He takes the wealth he has and he gives out, here's 30 days worth of labor for you, 30 days, 30 days, 30 days, all right? Each of them received the same thing in this parable. Remember, in the other one, they got it according to their abilities, 5, 2, and 1. In this one, they each get 1. Well, one guy who gets 1 multiplies it to 10. The other guy who gets 1 multiplies it to 5. And the third one must have been the twin of the other guy because he hides it into the ground. That's all right? Now when the Lord returns, he says to the one who has 10, you took what was given to you and you multiplied it to 10, be over 10 cities. Now the reward is proportionate to the multiplication, because the one who had 5 is now you're over 5 cities. And so there's a proportionate. Now, the basis of the stewardship talents is also different. On the first one, it's according to their abilities, 5, 2, and 1. On this one, the owner just says, here, everybody gets the same. What are you going to do with it? You follow that? They each get 1. There are things that we all have that are the same, and there are gifts you have that are unique to you. That's the 2 accountabilities of stewardship. We all have the gospel. We all have the Holy Spirit. Okay? That's given to us. What are we doing with what's been given to all of us? All right? And I find it significant that I think in the second one, the mina, which nobody uses that word, so it's kind of a weird word. Pound, we'll call it, is the bigger item. It's like the 30 days worth of work, okay, versus in the first one, the talent wasn't as weighty, okay, value as much. And the things we have in common are of higher value, greater weight than the things we have that are special, that we're all accountable for. So we share a lot in common. And I think I've been challenged many times by fellow believers who I think have gone further with less when I look at some of the giftings, even in our church, and how gifted we are. A number of people who come through here, I cannot believe how many gifted people are in this church, okay? It's like we're standing at the door. You don't have gifts? Please don't come. You know, we just, only the highly gifted come to this church. It's like this is a gifted place. But I'm challenged by the fact that some folks with less gifting go further on the common pound that's been handed out, okay? They take what we all share in common and they're running with it. And I think that's a challenge for us to accept, that we need to look at both of these parables on stewardship. And so ministry is stewardship. It's according to ability, but it's also what's common and given to all of us. We're living a ministry stewardship. Now, there's just some areas of stewardship I want to mention. There's a stewardship of truth. Paul said, let a man consider us as servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. Paul considered himself a steward of the mysteries. Paul was an extraordinary man. I'm a Paulite. I don't know if there's such a thing, but I'm a Paulite. I think this guy is so extraordinary in what God showed him and the price that he paid and his stewardship of truth, that he paid the price for it. And it's in his call, I'll show you great things, you're going to suffer for me, and I'm going to show you great things. And those two went together in his life. and he realized that he was a steward of the mysteries. I doubt if he could have imagined how impacting his life would be. Even people who are non-Christians, who make a list of the 10 most influential people in history, Paul's almost always included in the top 10. And the only reason he's not number one is the bias against faith, okay? He would be number one on the charts, on all the people that he's influenced just as an individual. And it's really as a steward of truth is how he did it. And what God did with his life and the things that he wrote are still volumes being written about today. And he considered himself a steward of what God showed him. We are stewards of the truth. What has God shown you? Paul told Timothy, teach faithful people who will teach others. Who are you passing it on to that will pass it on to others? It's interesting that just the history line from the apostles up through to the time when we had the New Testament completed in writing is they're just passing the truth from person to person. And before it was really put in and passed around in written form. And so they pass it to one and pass it to another and pass it to another. And the truth gets passed down all the way to us. Excuse me, that's a stewardship of truth. I'm a steward of truth. You're a steward of truth. I've often wondered why God invested in me. I'm not joking when I would say I wouldn't have picked me if I was God. I would, but he did. He not only picked me, he's connected me through my life to very smart, wise, experienced people. Not just the ones that you know of, like Charles. Well, of course you're talking about Charles. Yes, obvious. Okay. But why would I get connected with Charles, who ended up really profoundly impacting our church? And why would God do that, to invest that in me and us? Why would I go to St. Louis U and God put it on people's hearts to pay my way? I didn't pay a dime to go to school. I didn't borrow a dime. It was like God paid my way through my education. And I mean, what is that all about? That's God investing. Okay. Why do we end up hooked up with, and this, maybe everybody feels this way, and I hope they do. Why do we end up getting connected to the cream of the crop? George Wafula. I don't think you get any kinder than George. I just don't think you get any more loving than George and caring for the people there in Kenya. He's pastoring a church, leading a school, and he's just thrilled. He comes here and he becomes part of our family. Okay? These are not accidents. Amos, down way over there. Okay? Right now I'm asking for Costa Rica. I'm asking God for Costa Rica. I'm greedy. Okay? God's going to connect us to someone. It might be on this trip. All right? It might be Pastor Luis, if God's going to use him as the catalyst for that nation, and somehow we'll get connected because we're stewards of truth. It's a stewardship. And when you have a stewardship of truth, God connects you to people in which the truth you have gets to be passed on to them. So when I get to go and teach in the school, I will take the stewardship of truth and invest it in anybody in Kenya who will listen. I will not know wherever it all goes, and that is okay. All I need to know is that I have fulfilled my stewardship. That's all I need to know. Mike will go and has the stewardship of looking at the system of potentially connecting us together via the internet. And all that business experience is his stewardship that he will bring to Kenya. And it's not my place to do this, but I did it anyway. I asked Mike, in business terms, I tasked Mike, with, I want you to keep your eye open for someone who's an administrator who can connect with George. I think I know who it is. I think it's Alex, but I could be wrong. I'm not the business guy that sees the administration side always. So George needs an administrator. They need to team together. Larry is here. George can't pastor a church, care for the students, and administrate the school. Can't be done. Okay? And so now we've got to start looking for that person to help. And maybe we might find that person and help and say, hey, George, have you considered this and that? Stewardship, using your gift to advance the kingdom. And so we're stewards of truth. We're stewards of the gifts that God gives us. Each one's received a gift. Minister according as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. Now, sometimes we want a gift God hasn't given us, or we don't develop the gift God did give us. Sometimes our faith will be greatly challenged to develop those gifts. But for you to be a steward of a gift and multiply it, and you have a gift, say God gives you 2, and you have gifts, you can't sit on them. You have to multiply them. How are you going to multiply those gifts? By developing them. That's how. And so you have to give yourself to developing your gift. If I were actually gifted to sing, I would learn what a C note is. I would. I'd figure that out. You know that? I would know how to sing on key. There is a C note, isn't there? Sure. Okay. I would learn what that is. I understand there's a thing called a chord, which is a bunch of notes on top of each other. I would learn a chord, okay? If I was gifted to play music, I would learn a chord. There's a lot of things about music that's very complex, that just goes over the top of my head because I don't have the ear to hear it, all right? But if I were doing music, I would learn those things, and I would learn how to play a piano maybe, all right? I would learn different styles of music and different things. It might not even be my taste, okay? I've read all kinds of books that are not my taste. Sometimes I've learned more from the person that disagrees with me than the one who agrees, because they challenge me to rethink what I think I know, and sometimes to alter it a little bit and then to reaffirm it. And so I would learn in different styles of music. I wouldn't let that gift be isolated just into what I like. That would be like me preaching the same message every week, or I have 10 favorites. These are the ones I like, and these are the stories I like. And okay, I would develop that, and I would think if you've got a music gift or wherever your gift lies, that you would develop it. That's a stewardship. As a teacher, I work on trying to find ways to say things that are understandable to the listener, because the steward isn't just the person who says, there, I said it, now it's up to you, do whatever you want to with it. That's not stewardship. James 3 says, wisdom is from above is first peaceable, pure, easy to be entreated. Okay? You want to find a way to convey it, to say it in a way that's understandable. And so I never alter what I believe by how I want to say it, but I will alter how I say it to connect often to a different generation. Not every generation thinks like my generation. Some of them are very confused. And so, I have to find a way to say maybe the same thing in different words. Otherwise, I'm not a good steward of truth. I'm just a possessor of it. I'm not passing it on. And so you have to find ways to grow. Another area is people. We're stewards of people. I love this story because the disciples of John the Baptist are upset because more people are coming to Jesus and his disciples to get baptized than were coming to John's. Okay? Now, I like this because these guys are honorable. They're hey, John, you were here first. okay? They ought to be coming more to you than to him. And you baptized him. So what's the story? All right. And John, of course, he's got it clear. No, a man can receive nothing unless it's been given to him from heaven. This is about people. All right? People are a stewardship. God gives you people. I've always believed that regarding this church, that God gives us people. That makes me totally free to not be striving about it and to hold people open-handed because God gives people. God directs people's lives. He puts the body together. And so the church is something that God puts together. He brings the people. The people in this church are not mine. I have a stewardship of pastoring the whole church, and people from outside of us will ask me, how's your church doing? But I don't refer to it as my church. I'll call it our church. I'll call it Christ the King Church. It's the Lord's church. He's the one, he bought it with his blood. I didn't pay the price for it. And so I don't think anyone can claim the church. Jesus paid for it. But sometimes people ask, how's your church? And it's natural for people to identify the church with the pastor. It's just the way people talk, the way they think. That's natural. I avoid it in relationship to the church. I do call my cell group on Tuesday morning my cell. Okay, our cells are just identified with your names. All right, David's cell, Jason's cell, Joyce's cell. I mean, you can go around the list. And though it's got your name on it, you don't own it. You don't own the people in it. You're a steward of their life that God has entrusted to you. That's actually quite serious, that God would entrust people to you. There are times I know as the pastor of this church, I've known, and I'm not going to mention the name because you know who I'm talking about. They're in the church now. I've known the person before they got saved that I was their pastor. They weren't even a sheep yet. I don't know how this works, but I knew. And so from the time they walked into the church, when I first met this person, I started relating to this person as though I was their pastor and just talking to them pastorally, like I would anyone else in the church. And that person now is a believer. I don't even think that person could tell you when they crossed the line. I never gave the altar call to that person. I just pastored them into faith. Sometimes God gives you people who are not sheep yet for you to pastor, who will come in to what God has for them, okay? And that's God giving you people. I have people in different parts of the nation that I pray for, and then they are mine, whether they know it or not. I'm okay with that. I don't have to have them say, you're it. As a steward, I have to be faithful with what God gives to me. And sometimes God gives you a person, and it may be in life they're going a different direction, but you still know you're their pastor. All right? That's how God works. Who has God given you? Who is in your group? God has given you them. Who's outside your group that God has given you? That's a stewardship of people that is entrusted to you. Sometimes it's family. Sometimes it's friends. Sometimes it's just an acquaintance. I'm not going to tell you there's a rhyme or a reason. I'm only going to tell you it's something the Lord does. And God gives you people. And you're to pray for those people and care for those people, and God will do things through them, and you'll see it. And sometimes you're not even right there, but you're rejoicing in what you see. There's people. There's a stewardship of people, and you have a stewardship of everyone in your group. You have a stewardship of the children in the church, the youth in the church, the worship leaders. It just goes up and down the line, a stewardship. So there's truth, there's gift, and there's people in ministry. These are stewardships that are given to us that we have to give ourselves to. And then one more thing I just wanted to touch on is delegation. This is one of those verses in Luke 16 that we quote often. Faithful with little, given much. Faithful with money, given true riches. This is the one about faithful with another's, given your own. If you have not been faithful in that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? I picked this picture that you're looking at because to me it represents, I'm going to call it organic delegation instead of corporate delegation. Corporate delegation are these diagram models that look like pyramids. They're very neat, they're very tidy. Organic delegation is not neat and it's not tidy. What you have here, I'm assuming the guy that's kind of the golden boy there at the top is the leader in this situation. And off to his left is Yellow Boy, okay? And Yellow Boy has two people there. And if you can see the lines, you see it goes over and down to two here. But then over here you have these three that don't have no one in between. They're just what I like, this is not really diagrammed out, okay? Yet there are clean lines of accountability because you see the lines that are there. And so in delegation and stewardship, there's going to be involved with other people. It's not just me and my stewardship. It's a stewardship that interacts together. Because if you can't be faithful with another's, who's going to give you your own? The Lord is telling you something. If you're not going to be faithful helping what I've given to another, why am I going to give you your own? He's showing us something, all right? And so this is involving delegation. And delegation is often spoken of in corporate terms, but for us, it's organic, it's relational, but it's also real. And so in delegating things to someone, what you need to do is make sure you have clear lines of accountability and open lines of communication. That's the important thing. Clear lines of accountability, open lines of communication. Now, communication is a two-way street. It involves being clear about responsibility, your accountability, and your authority. In just practical terms, a few weeks ago at church, our switcher broke. Well, it didn't break. Maybe it did. I don't know. It's one of those things. It stopped working. Thank you, David. It stopped working one Sunday morning. And as a result, we didn't have slides up. You remember that morning? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. It was terrible. Just terrible. All right. Almost destroyed the whole church. It was amazing. But anyway, it went out that morning. So now we have to look at it and say, all right, do we have to buy a new switcher? Oh, my goodness. We have to buy a new switcher. Well, actually, switchers can be pretty expensive if you get one with little push buttons and all this kind of stuff. Well, I'm not gifted in switcherdom. Okay. But thankfully, Elizabeth is. Elizabeth is gifted in switcherdom. She's taken a whole class on it at school. No, I doubt that. But all right. And so I said to Elizabeth, find out what's there for switchers. So there you go. She's got a responsibility. And get back to us. Tell me and David what's going on. Okay, we got accountability. Now I then say to her, okay, here's our price range, generally speaking. Let's keep an eye on what we got. And if we have to get another switcher, you make the decision. There's authority. Now, I didn't write it out on paper. It was just a conversation. But there were lines of communication that were involved in the process. That's important. You have your lines of communication. It's wide open, okay? And so you try to communicate clearly. Now, also, when I don't communicate clearly, it's Elizabeth's responsibility to get back to me and say, what do you mean by this? What is the price point? Because there's all kinds of switchers out there. I could come back with a $5,000 switcher if that's what you want. And so it's her responsibility to come back to clarify the lines of accountability. What am I really asking for? Now, I have the responsibility to try to communicate, But communication is a two-way street. Now, in business, they try to avoid the stress of miscommunication by putting everything in writing and having these big manuals. And then they put, well, you're in this area, this is your responsibility, these are your tasks, these are the people you communicate with, da-da-da-da-da-da-dee. Okay? That's not organic, and we're not going to do it. Okay? I just don't want to do it. It's too much time, not fruitful, it's not organic. Plus, I'll tell you what it does. It robs us of the growth that comes from misunderstanding. Okay? When I don't communicate clearly and someone gets upset with me about that, that tells me where our relationship is. That says more than dotting the little, checking off the boxes on an organizational chart. If I communicate, but the person doesn't quite get back to me and say, well, I didn't understand what you said, and then later I come back and say, well, what happened? Oh, I didn't do anything about it. How come? Well, you didn't tell me to do anything about it. It's not my fault. That tells me a lot about our relationship. Okay? I learn a whole lot about people through miscommunication. There's some great things that can be learned. Okay? Now, you take all that away with organizational charts, that's not going to help us grow. Not as people. When you're working together with people, you give the benefit of the doubt to that person you're working with. And you say, oh, I didn't communicate that? I'm so sorry. I should have called you and asked. I forgot to do that. We got to get better on our two-way communications. That's what you do. Now, businesses don't operate on trust. They operate on flow charts. We don't operate on a flow chart. We operate on trust and believing in each other and working together. And so the opportunities we have then are to grow together. Now, take this a step further. There are times, I'm sure it's happened more than once, where I haven't communicated clearly. And David will make a decision.
You always communicate clearly.
Thank you, David. David will make a decision because in the end, if you can't train decision makers, you cannot reproduce leaders. You can only reproduce implementers of what you want. Okay? I don't want all those decisions. All right? And so he'll make a decision. Now, if he makes a decision I wouldn't have made, I don't go blowing off and say, what is wrong with you to make that decision? My first thought is, did I even communicate about that? Maybe I didn't. And I'll back his decision, period. I said, okay, great, let's do it. And we'll get it done. Because if I don't communicate clearly the responsibility, the accountability, and the authority, and someone's put in a position where they just needed to make a decision, and I wasn't around to clarify what I'd left unclear, then it's my responsibility to back that person. That's trust. Okay? David knows I've got his back. And then we'll talk later. And so what did you think? I thought, well, I don't know. I would have maybe thought about this or that. Okay? We got to have each other's back that way. And so that the person who's doing the delegating, so to speak, has the back of the other person, but the other person is saying, listen, I tried to get hold of you. Okay, it's not like, it never even crosses my mind that David just didn't even care about getting hold of me to talk about it. It's those situations where you're just not communicating. It's probably happened once or twice. I haven't answered a text. And so, and I accept the responsibility that comes from not answering that text and say, all right, I've got your back. I find that price a lot less than answering every text, okay? You got to have each other's back. It's trust. Miscommunication, delegation will stress the trust level and show where it's really at. Okay? So we don't want to have an organizational flow chart like that takes all that out, because that's what businesses do. Because truth is, they don't operate on trust. We do. And this gives us opportunity to grow. Delegation does. And so we can actually then really grow in our stewardship and working together by that trust that comes from miscommunication. And we grow in communication as well. I'm not saying we don't have that responsibility. It's when you fail to do it, okay, or you failed to ask for clarification over what was given to you. That's the responsibility we each have in our stewardship. But even in that, it's like an old friend of mine used to say, miscommunication is part of communication, because communication is a process of saying it, hearing it, and clarifying it. It's not an event. It literally is not just a text or an email. That might be some facts, but it's amazing how the facts are clear to the sender that are not clear to the receiver. And then the receiver responds without getting a clarification, and then you got a real serious miscommunication. Okay? So it is a process of saying it, hearing it, clarifying it. Communication is a big part of our stewardship and delegation. And the more we do it, the better we get at it. But you cannot communicate with people that you don't trust. You will misunderstand their words. And no amount of saying it will solve where trust is lacking. It just doesn't work. Where there is trust, you can even say it wrong, and then Elizabeth will say, "Did you mean this?" "Yeah, that's exactly what I meant. Thank you very much." You communicate with each other that way. It's a big deal. And I think that's where the connectedness of stewardship comes together in ministry, is in this area of delegation, because we interact so much together. And that's the bond that holds it, is trust. And so we are in stewardship together, is what we are. It isn't my stewardship and your stewardship. It's really our stewardship. We're in stewardship together. That's why this one I wanted to bring out, because I think this is important for us to understand.